The Valkyrie Dominion fleet drifted above the colony world like carrion birds circling a carcass. From the bridge of his cruiser, Commander Serac watched the surface burn with a cold detachment, as though the screams and firestorms were nothing more than background noise to another tedious duty. He leaned against the rail with lazy arrogance, his long fingers curled around a glass of dark spiced liquor. The human settlement below had fallen in a matter of hours. Resistance, if it could be called that, had been laughable: scattered gunfire, crude barricades, and bodies collapsing in the dust. His subordinates reported their progress with clipped efficiency, but he waved them off with the weariness of a man who had already grown bored. Humans, he thought, were disappointing. He had been promised they were stubborn, unpredictable, even fierce. But so far they behaved like every other subjugated species, pleading, panicking, begging for mercy. Perhaps the galaxy had exaggerated their reputation. His troops strutted through the streets of the ruined settlement, pulling survivors from hiding places, jeering at their weakness. Some soldiers made wagers over how long the species would last once the Dominion set its sights on their homeworld. Serac smirked at their laughter, indulging the thought that he might be the one to crush Earth itself and earn a place in the annals of Valkyrie history. He descended to the surface hours later, not out of necessity, but ceremony. His presence was meant to remind both his troops and the captives who held authority here. Soldiers snapped to rigid attention as he strode through the ash-choked plaza where the last defenders had made their stand. Shackled humans huddled in lines, their faces smudged with soot and grief, eyes sunken from exhaustion. They barely raised their heads when he approached, and Serac felt the faintest pang of disappointment. He had hoped for defiance, at least. Then he saw her. A woman among the captives, lean and ragged, but there was something in the way she stood that tugged at him. While others bent under the weight of chains, she kept her back straight. Her face was streaked with grime, but her eyes, sharp, steady, watched him without fear. She did not avert her gaze when their eyes met, and that alone was enough to stir irritation in him. He stepped toward her, his boots grinding over scorched stone, and motioned for guards to drag her forward. "This one," he said with amusement, studying her like an odd specimen. A spine still intact. Perhaps a leader among them? Or merely too foolish to know her place? The guards shoved her closer. Her collar was torn, her lips cracked from thirst, but still she did not bow. The silence between them thickened, until Serac broke it with a low chuckle. With a swift, casual movement, he seized her by the collar, jerking her off balance. His soldiers roared with laughter, emboldened by their commander's display. "You belong to me now," he sneered in her face, voice dripping with mockery. "You humans think yourselves dangerous, but you are nothing but fragile animals." A touch of pressure, and... He didn't finish. Her hand snapped up like lightning, twisting his wrist before his words had cooled on the air. She pivoted, pulling him off balance, and in a blur of motion, he crashed to the ground on his back, the breath driven from his lungs. The sound of impact cracked through the square, silencing the laughter in an instant. For a moment, the entire world seemed to freeze. Soldiers stared, mouths half open, weapons half raised, uncertain if they had even witnessed what they thought. The woman released his wrist, stepping back, her expression unchanging. She didn't gloat. She didn't even smirk. She simply looked down at him, as though he were no more significant than the dust beneath her bare feet. The silence broke with the snap of rifles as his troops surged forward, seizing her, slamming her to the ground. Shackles bit into her arms and legs, but still her eyes burned, calm, unwavering. Serac climbed to his feet, fury flushing his features, but behind the rage there lingered something colder. Embarrassment, doubt, the humiliation of a Dominion commander floored by a starving prisoner before his soldiers could react. He raised a hand to silence them. His voice was steadier than he expected when he spoke. "Do not kill her. Bind her. I will deal with her personally." The woman was dragged away, but not before her eyes met his one last time. There was no triumph there, only a strange and steady certainty, as though she knew something he did not. Serac told himself it was nothing more than animal defiance, but a sliver of unease wormed its way beneath his composure. His soldiers, though quick to resume their mocking laughter, avoided meeting his gaze. The sight of their commander sprawled in the dirt had planted something dangerous in them as well. Doubt. That night, aboard the cruiser, he tried to drown the image with liquor and contempt. Yet her face lingered in his mind, that unyielding stare replaying behind his eyelids. She had not been strong, not in the physical sense. It was something else, something unsettling. He dismissed it with a shake of his head. One anomaly meant nothing. A single ember could not resist a storm. Still, when reports reached him that the Dominion Council had voted to approve an assault on Earth itself, Serac volunteered immediately. His humiliation would be forgotten the moment he raised the Dominion banner over humanity's cradle world. Let the galaxy remember him as the man who broke the spine of Earth, not the fool who stumbled before a ragged prisoner. His fleet would launch within the cycle, and he promised himself that the memory of her eyes would be ground to ash along with her planet. On the surface below, smoke rose from the broken colony, curling into the stars like a warning no one cared to read. The humans sat shackled, silent, watching the sky. Among them, whispers spread of the woman who had dropped a Dominion commander before his troops could breathe. Some said she had been trained, others that she carried a secret none of them understood. But all agreed on one thing. The look in her eyes had not been the look of a captive. It had been the look of a predator biding its time. As Serac's ships prepared to descend on Earth, he did not hear the last broadcast from human colonies, transmitted in a dozen languages, calm and unyielding. Do not mistake our silence for weakness. The words went largely unnoticed by the Dominion, dismissed as empty bravado. But in the hearts of those who had seen the woman stand tall against the commander, the words planted roots. Something was coming, something greater than fire and chains. And Serac, though he would never admit it aloud, could not shake the echo of the moment his back hit the ground, nor the certainty in her gaze that his empire had already made its greatest mistake. The Dominion fleet crossed the void with unshakable confidence. Dozens of war cruisers and carriers hung in perfect formation, their engines humming like the low growl of predators stalking prey. Commander Serac stood at the center of the flagship's bridge, cloaked in the certainty of imminent victory. Earth, humanity's cradle, rotated slowly on the main view screen, blue oceans shimmering under white clouds. To him, it looked fragile, almost naive in its beauty. His officers traded wagers over how long the planet's defenses would last. Most gave it a matter of hours. Orbital resistance is negligible, reported the tactical officer, his tone clipped and assured. Primitive satellites. None appear armed. Serac gave a thin smile. As expected, a planet that still clings to oceans and soil cannot match a Dominion fleet. Begin the opening barrage. Missiles streaked through the atmosphere, cutting brilliant arcs of fire into the night sky. Explosions rippled across industrial districts and communication hubs. From orbit, the blossoming flames resembled flowers blooming across a garden. The bridge officers observed in silence, waiting for the inevitable surrender broadcasts. Yet the expected panic never came. Civilian transmissions cut off abruptly, replaced not with frantic cries, but with silence. Evacuation patterns suggested prior preparation, too orderly, too complete. Entire cities went dark simultaneously, as though lights had been switched off by design. It unsettled the crew, though none dared voice it aloud. Serac's lips tightened. Press the assault. Deploy ground forces. Let us see if their courage holds when fire rains upon their homes. Dropships plunged into the atmosphere, disgorging armored troops into the ruins of human cities. They found streets eerily empty. The few who resisted fought with precision, not desperation, snipers striking from hidden positions, small teams withdrawing before being pinned down. The battles felt less like conquest and more like maneuvering through a trap that hadn't yet been sprung. Reports filtered in. Warehouses packed with supplies but abandoned, communication nodes gutted before Dominion soldiers arrived, whole residential districts reduced to rubble by human hands rather than Dominion fire. The humans had denied their enemy the satisfaction of plunder. It was not submission. It was strategy. On the bridge, murmurs rose among the officers. "Where are their leaders?" one asked under his breath. "Why haven't they begged for terms?" whispered another. Serac ignored them, though unease began to gnaw at his confidence. He remembered the woman from the colony, the one who had dropped him with effortless precision. Her defiance had been an outlier, he had told himself. Yet now, with every strangely precise withdrawal, he began to wonder if she had not been an exception at all but a reflection of something larger. Hours later, Dominion squads uncovered what they believed to be a major command post beneath the ruins of collapsed skyscraper. Serac ordered them inside, eager for a symbol of dominance to parade before his troops. He expected to find generals cowering, perhaps a council of human officials cornered at last. Instead, the transmission that came back was static, followed by a scream cut short. Then silence. "Connection lost," muttered the comms officer, hands moving furiously over the controls. Before Serac could demand answers, the main view screen lit up. A face filled the projection. Not one of his officers, not a Dominion broadcast, but a human leader speaking directly to the fleet. The man wore no armor, only a plain uniform, and his voice was calm, measured, even polite. "You came to Earth expecting to find panic," he said evenly. "You came to burn, enslave, and claim. What you found instead was our silence. Do not mistake that silence for weakness. It was patience. It was preparation." The bridge froze. Officers glanced at one another, confusion etched across their faces. Serac leaned forward, jaw tight, as the broadcast continued. "You thought our colonies were defenseless," the man went on. "They were not. They were decoys. While you celebrated your victories, we moved our people, we built our weapons, and we watched. Every ship you lost to boredom, every world you burned without challenge, it was time we required. And you gave it to us." Static crackled, replaced by maps and schematics. Valkyrie eyes widened as they saw wormhole gates pulsing with energy in the outer system, fleets mobilized in secret hangars, and automated defenses buried under Earth's crust. Every colony that had fallen had been a calculated sacrifice, every defeat a curtain hiding the truth. Serac's breath caught in his throat. His soldiers had mocked humanity's stubbornness. Yet here was proof that their silence had been no surrender, it had been strategy. And he, Commander Serac, had walked his fleet into the heart of their trap. The broadcast ended as suddenly as it had begun, leaving only the stars on the screen. No boasts, no threats. Just the echo of a simple, chilling message: patience, preparation. "Commander," one of the bridge officers asked hesitantly, "what are your orders?" For the first time in his career, Serac hesitated. His mind replayed the prisoner's eyes, that unshakable certainty, as she looked down on him. He had dismissed it as arrogance. Now he wondered if she had known all along that this moment would come, that the Dominion's pride would be the very knife pressed to its throat. "Pull the ground forces back to defensive positions," he ordered, voice low. "This is no longer a hunt. This is war." Even as he spoke, alarms blared. Unidentified energy signatures bloomed across the solar system, wormhole gates opening with surgical precision. Human fleets emerged from the void, not ragtag militias but sleek, disciplined armadas. They did not fire blindly. They targeted supply ships, communication relays, and Dominion escorts with ruthless accuracy. On the bridge, fear spread like a contagion. Officers who once mocked humanity now whispered to one another, their voices edged with disbelief. How could they hide this? How could we not see? Serac remained outwardly composed, but inside a storm raged. He had underestimated them. Worse, the entire Dominion had. And now the trap's jaws were closing. The first clash was brief, a surgical ambush that severed half the fleet's communications. Dominion cruisers floundered, their formation broken. Serac gripped the rail, watching as human ships vanished into wormholes only to reappear seconds later at devastating angles. This was not desperation. It was mastery. The central conflict had revealed itself with brutal clarity. The Valkyrie Dominion believed itself the apex predator of the galaxy. But humanity had been preparing in silence, shaping its fear into weapons, turning its losses into bait. And now, standing at the edge of Earth's atmosphere, Serac realized he was no longer the hunter. He was the prey. The bridge shook as another Dominion vessel went dark. Serac straightened, forcing steel into his voice. "Signal the fleet. Hold formation. Show them the Dominion does not break." But even as he gave the order, doubt spread in his chest like poison. The woman's stare, the human leader's calm declaration, the trap unfolding before his eyes, they all whispered the same truth. The Dominion had made its greatest mistake. It had awakened something far more dangerous than it had ever imagined. And Earth, silent and waiting, was not the victim of this story. It was the blade now drawn from its sheath. The Dominion fleet staggered under the weight of precision strikes. Human warships slipped through wormholes as though they were doorways in the air, appearing and vanishing at impossible angles. For every Dominion cruiser that managed to bring its guns to bear, 3 more were flanked and gutted before their volleys found targets. Commander Serac stood stiffly on his bridge, hands clasped behind his back, forcing himself to project control even as the room trembled with every new loss. He had seen ambushes before, had commanded fleets through them. This was not that. Ambushes were messy, Desperate affairs, where prey struck at shadows and preyed to wound the predator before being devoured. What he witnessed now was the opposite, precise, almost surgical dismantling. Humanity was not throwing itself at them. Humanity was taking them apart piece by piece, with cold patience, as though they had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. Another cruiser lost at Grid 5, his tactical officer reported, sweat breaking across his brow. "We are losing cohesion, Commander. They're wormholes. There is no predicting there." "Enough." Sarak's voice cut through the panic like steel. "We are Valkyrie. We adapt. Hold formation. If they strike from shadows, then we burn the shadows away." The officer obeyed, but Sarak could read the fear behind his eyes. They all felt it. He felt it. He remembered the woman who had laid him out with nothing but timing and intent. Her stare had not been defiance. It had been knowledge. She had known what was coming, even when he had not. The memory returned unbidden, as though her gaze had followed him across the stars, waiting for this very moment. Hours later, after the first clash settled into an uneasy lull, Sarak retreated to his private quarters. He ordered reports forwarded to his console, but for the first time in his career, he delayed reading them. Instead, he accessed captured archives of human history. If he was to fight them, he had to understand them. The screen flickered with images, grainy black and white, reels of trenches, choking with mud and fire. He saw men charging into machine gun fire with nothing but resolve. The dates shocked him. This war, with its cruelty and slaughter, was not centuries old as he expected, but mere generations. He continued. Cities burned under aerial bombardment. Children were dragged into shelters while entire nations clashed. Mushroom clouds blossomed, their shadows etching scars across the earth. Each recording painted a portrait of a species both self-destructive and terrifyingly resilient. What unsettled him most was not their violence, but their adaptability. Every weapon forged against them, they had copied, improved, or overcome. Every setback had been absorbed into something harder, sharper. Even their defeats had been lessons written in fire. A cold realization pressed against Sarak's chest. The Dominion had faced countless species, brilliant tacticians, resilient warriors, cunning diplomats. But none had combined desperation, innovation, and a refusal to die quite like this. Humanity's history was not one of steady dominance, but of clawing survival, rising from ashes again and again. It was not glory that defined them, but persistence. When the officers summoned him back to the command deck, he emerged with a mask of authority, though his stomach churned. Reports of Dominion losses scrolled across every terminal. Entire strike groups had gone dark. Others remained intact but demoralized, officers reporting whispers of human phantoms haunting them through wormholes. The High Council's transmission arrived not long after. Holograms of Dominion leaders filled the chamber, their jeweled robes and flowing crests a grotesque contrast to the chaos of battle. They demanded explanations. "Commander Sarak," one intoned, "you reported negligible resistance. Yet our fleets are bleeding. You will account for this failure." Sarak stood straighter, his voice level but edged with urgency. "This is no ordinary foe. We walked into a war prepared centuries in advance. Humanity used our arrogance against us. Their patience, their silence, it was not weakness. It was a weapon." A ripple of disdain passed among the counselors. One waved a jeweled hand dismissively. "You speak as though these primitives are our equals." "They are not primitives," Sarak snapped, losing his composure for the first time. "They are predators who have been watching us longer than we knew. Their colonies, everyone we conquered, were sacrifices to mislead us. You do not understand. This is not luck. This is intent." Another counselor sneered. "Or perhaps you are simply justifying your humiliation, Commander. We have heard of your encounter with one of their prisoners." Laughter flickered across the connection. "Perhaps fear has clouded your judgment." The words struck like blades. Sarak's jaw tightened, but he did not retreat. "Mock me if you wish. But I tell you now, if we dismiss them, if we pretend they are weak, then the Dominion itself will burn. Humanity is not an enemy like the others. They are something else." His warnings were ignored. The council dissolved the transmission, their laughter echoing in the silence that followed. Sarak's officers looked to him for guidance, but he could see doubt in their eyes as well. Doubt in him, doubt in the Dominion. Later, in the mess halls of the fleet, rumors spread unchecked. Soldiers whispered of human warships that blinked into existence like ghosts, of entire units disappearing into ambushes, of a commander laid low by a prisoner who fought like a trained assassin. Fear was spreading, and with fear came cracks in discipline. Serac walked the decks that evening, his eyes scanning the faces of his troops. He saw the unease in their movements, the way they avoided his gaze. He wanted to scold them, to remind them of the Dominion's might, but he could not bring himself to speak words he no longer believed. Instead, he stood in silence, the weight of command heavier than it had ever been. The next engagement began at dawn, and the humans struck with even greater precision. Swarms of drones spilled from hidden hangars, overwhelming Dominion flak lines. Wormhole gates blinked open in the heart of formations, disgorging strike teams that cut like scalpels through their defenses. Dominion ships fought with desperation, but their blows landed on shadows, while every human strike was deliberate, final. Serac clenched his fists on the command rail, his mind racing. He had tried to deny it, to suppress the thought, but now he knew with certainty the Dominion had underestimated an enemy who had spent generations sharpening itself in secret. Humanity had been patient, had sacrificed, had studied. And now the Dominion's empire trembled because of it. The battle ended in retreat, the fleet scattering to regroup. On the bridge, silence reigned. No one spoke of victory because no one had seen any. Serac exhaled slowly, forcing himself upright, forcing himself to appear unshaken. Yet inside he felt the truth. He had begun this war convinced he would carve his name into the annals of history. Now he understood that history was already being written, but not by him. The humans were writing it, and the galaxy would remember their words, not his. In the quiet that followed, as the Dominion fleet licked its wounds, Serac returned again to the prisoner's eyes. That steady certainty, that unshakable gaze, it haunted him, because now he recognized it for what it had been. Not defiance, not arrogance. It had been prophecy. The Dominion fleet limped back into contested space like a predator bleeding from too many wounds. Scattered, broken, their formations were no longer the gleaming knife's edge that had once cut across galaxies. Commander Serac stood in the command well, staring at the holographic projections of fractured battle lines, his expression carved into stone. Officers whispered around him, their voices brittle, as though even the act of speaking might summon more human ships from the void. The humans did not chase recklessly. That was what made it worse. They did not hurl themselves at the Dominion to taste blood. They waited, silent and calculating, striking only when precision promised victory. It was the restraint of a predator too confident to rush. Each engagement was a lesson, each loss an incision deeper into the Dominion's flesh. Serac received a new report, his eyes narrowing as he read it. The wormhole incursions were no longer limited to Earth's orbit. Human fleets were appearing across multiple sectors, coordinated so flawlessly it was as though they moved with a single mind. Worlds that had once housed Valkyrie garrisons went dark in hours. Supply chains unraveled like severed veins. It was not conquest. It was dismantling. He convened with his senior officers. Their faces betrayed exhaustion, fear, and something dangerously close to defeat. "They fight like no enemy we have known," one admitted, rubbing trembling hands together. "Every strike tears out something vital. They know where we are weakest." "They know because we showed them," Serac replied coldly. "We paraded our strength, mocked their silence, and they studied us. Now they wield that knowledge like a blade." No one argued. The weight of his words pressed down like gravity. The next battle began before they were ready. Wormholes bloomed around the fleet in silent blossoms of light. Human ships poured through, but not in overwhelming numbers. They came in squads, each one with a purpose, like surgeons in the middle of an operation. Dominion vessels buckled, engines sheared from their hulls, command nodes vaporized. Serac shouted orders with the force of a man trying to hold back a flood with his bare hands. At one point, a cruiser near his flagship exploded in a silent blossom of fire, fragments scattering across the void. The shockwave rattled the bridge, and for a moment, Serac thought he saw the reflection of his own end written in the flames. Yet he did not falter. He refused. "They want us broken," he said through gritted teeth, loud enough for the officers to hear. "They want us to surrender before we are dead. But we are Valkyrie, we endure." Even as he spoke, he knew the words rang hollow. For every Dominion ship that held the line, 3 more fell to human precision. It was not endurance that was being tested. It was inevitability. Hours bled into days. The Dominion Empire itself began to collapse. Sectors once loyal raised banners of rebellion, sensing weakness. Others broadcast surrender to the humans before battles even began. The High Council issued frantic orders, demanding Serac turn the tide, but their words arrived stripped of power. Authority had shifted. The Dominion no longer commanded fear. Humanity did. The final strike came not with thunder but with silence. Wormholes opened above the Dominion capital, not with swarms of ships but with a single projection. A human envoy appeared before the Emperor's court, calm and precise. They did not shout. They did not gloat. They simply said, "Lay down your arms. We are not here to destroy. We are here to end this." The Emperor surrendered that night. His voice, once the roar of an empire, trembled as he signed the terms. The Dominion was not crushed in fire. It was undone by certainty, by the realization that resistance would mean extinction. When the message reached Serac's fleet, silence reigned. Officers lowered their eyes, soldiers slumped in their chairs. It was finished. The war was over, and they had lost. Serac retreated to his chambers, the weight of defeat pressing into his chest like a blade. He expected anger, despair, perhaps even relief. Instead, he felt emptiness. He had dedicated his life to the Dominion's glory, only to watch it disintegrate in weeks. Humanity had not destroyed them with numbers or firepower. They had destroyed them with patience, calculation, and resolve. He remembered the prisoner again, her eyes steady, her certainty unwavering. She had known. Somehow she had known. The humans arrived days later, not as conquerors, but as rulers nonetheless. Their fleets encircled Dominion space with quiet authority. They offered surrender terms not drenched in cruelty, but in control. Autonomy was permitted, but oversight was absolute. Dominion worlds would govern themselves, but under the gaze of human fleets. When Serac was summoned, he expected execution. Instead, he found himself seated across from a human officer, a man with tired eyes and a voice that carried no triumph. "You are not without value," the human said. "You understand what your leaders refuse to see. You warned them, and they did not listen. You can still serve if you choose." Serac stared, uncomprehending. "Serve under you?" "Serve under the new order," the officer replied. "We will not erase your people, but we will not allow them to rise again unchecked. You will govern on our behalf. You will keep order while we keep watch." The words tasted like ash, but they carried no malice. It was worse than hatred, it was indifference. Humanity did not hate the Dominion. They had simply moved beyond it. Serac bowed his head, the fire of pride extinguished at last. "I will serve," he said quietly. Later, when he stood on a balcony overlooking a subdued Dominion city, he felt the eyes of his people on him. Some looked with hatred, others with relief, but all with the same unspoken question. What now? He had no answer. Only the memory of the prisoner's gaze returned to him, steady and certain. He finally understood that her look had not been defiance or even prophecy. It had been inevitability. That night, as human banners unfurled across the Dominion's worlds, Serac reflected on what had been lost. Humanity had not wanted war, but once it had been thrust upon them, they had embraced it with terrifying clarity. They had turned silence into strategy, patience into weapons, sacrifice into victory. The galaxy would never be the same. Dominion arrogance had birthed something far greater than itself, something that could not be put back in chains. And Serac, broken yet alive, understood the final truth. Humanity had not simply won a war. They had rewritten the order of the stars.